Israel committing a genocide?
No, emphatically not. There have been more bombs dropped in Gaza than people have been killed.
Hi guys, this is Sahar TV, and in today's video we'll see Major Andrew Fox, who is a former British military officer, giving his opinion about the situation in Gaza. Let's take a look.
Andrew, you just said that Egypt refused to open the border. Why is that?
Well, Egypt, of course, used to own Gaza. Up to 1967, that was entirely Egypt's possession. The Sinai is not particularly safe or stable. There's Bedouin insurgents in the Sinai Peninsula that Egypt is desperately trying to keep a handle on. They've spent a long time getting a grip of the Muslim Brotherhood issue they've had in Egypt. And I think the last thing they want to do is further destabilise the situation with 2 million refugees. That hasn't stopped Egypt joining the genocide case against Israel in the ICJ. And yet they have it in their power to end this genocide immediately by opening the heavily reinforced border gate that you see. So I've been along that border with Egypt, and it is an incredibly well reinforced and solid wall. So there's something that doesn't quite add up there. I would put it to you.
But in case you don't know, the border between Egypt and Gaza is a lot stronger and a lot stricter than the border between Israel and Gaza.
So they are pointing the finger at Israel and using the word genocide, which is a very, very, very serious claim to make. And yet they're doing nothing to alleviate the genocide. And yet very few people in the media or political commentators are pointing the finger at Egypt. I mean, how are they getting away with this?
Well, I think we've got a 50-plus, 60-plus year information campaign supporting what Hamas is doing in Gaza, and to an extent what the Palestinian Authority are doing in the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, or whichever we're calling it today. This was a reframing backed by a superpower, backed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War, to take the issue of Palestinianism, to turn it against Israel and reframe it as oppressor versus oppressed, which of course is the narrative that's been heavily pushed throughout sort of Western academia, Western media. And it is essentially because of that framing of oppressor versus oppressed, it gives the Palestinians a free pass to do whatever they want. And it means that Israel is always the bad guy, no matter what happens. And so extraneous issues like what are Egypt doing, what are the Gulf states doing, what are Turkey doing, what are Qatar doing, gets kind of overlooked completely because the focus is Israel as the bad guy, and that's really all that matters in that 60-year narrative that's been pushed so hard.
And, well, we've used the word genocide already. It's already come up, so let's delve right into this. Is Israel committing a genocide? No,
emphatically not. Look, there's a key factor to genocide, and that is the dolus specialis of the intent. Okay, so normally if you committed a crime, went to court, it would be the burden of proof would be beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, so 90% plus certainty that you'd committed the crime. But the dolus specialis, it's 100%. It cannot be anything else for it to be intent for genocide. And if you look at the fact that Israel has sustained 3,000 casualties, that Israel has the capability to end this tomorrow. If they really wanted to wipe out 2 million Palestinians, they have enough firepower to do that. And they've demonstrated that repeatedly over the last year, that they have firepower beyond anything, even the UK could bring to bear, quite frankly, and yet they're not using it. There have been more bombs dropped in Gaza than people have been killed.
That's it right there. And each bomb has the capability of killing 20+ people, meaning if it were to be a genocide, we would be in the hundreds of thousands of casualties.
Either the IDF are the worst shots in history, or they're actually taking care with civilian lives. You don't give vaccines for polio to the entire child population of Gaza if you're trying to destroy them. You don't facilitate twice the amount of food aid going into Gaza as was going in before the war if you're trying to kill everyone. You don't put ground troops into harm's way and have 3,000 families in Israel who are now having to deal with the death and the injury of their loved ones. Why on earth would you do these things if all you wanted to do was to destroy Palestinians or Gazans as an ethnic group? It just doesn't make any sense. And the intent that is inferred by some of the very dodgy statements that Israeli politicians have made, and I think we should face this head on.
Like Modric.
Smotrich, Ben Gvir, they've said some...
Modric is a former football player, mate. Luka Modric has nothing to do with what's happening in Gaza. Let's just be clear.
He may be Croatian. They do have a dodgy history of genocide, but let's put him to one side. But Smotrich and Ben Gvir have said outrageous things that are completely unacceptable, but they're not in the direct decision-making chain for the war.
They're not in the war cabinet. That's what he means.
Allegations against Netanyahu, against the old defense minister, Yoav Gallant, they're completely taken out of context.
But Andrew, can you not see though, and this is where I genuinely have a lot of trouble with this, can you not see that, let's say Britain and America invade Afghanistan, which they did, right? And, you know, we can argue about whether that was the right decision, whatever. And the finance minister of Britain goes out and starts making the sort of statements that Smotrich has been making. And you go, like, okay, he's the finance minister, maybe he's not in charge of the war decisions, but if he is in the cabinet and allowed to be in the cabinet while making those claims, that can't be anything other than a reflection of what that government sees as the right thing to be saying.
Yeah, up to a point. And I do agree with you. And I would utterly condemn everything that's come out of their mouths pretty much during this war. You know, they are absolutely advocating for genocide and ethnic cleansing. And whilst I don't necessarily agree with sanctioning them as the UK government has, actually it might be no bad thing if it gets them to sort of dial back a bit on that absolute nonsense that comes out of their mouths. So I'm fairly relaxed about that when it comes to what the UK government has done.
By the way, I don't think that the things that they're saying is absolute nonsense. Israel needs to annex Gaza and take it back under Israeli control, even if it's only security-wise, because we for sure are going to have a lot less terror attacks than what we experienced on October 7th. This happened because we left in 2005. So I 100% support the fact that Israel should take security control over the Gaza Strip, even if it means to have settlements in Gaza.
In respect to those two politicians. But the way the war is being fought is through the war cabinet, not the government cabinet. And that is now pretty much Bibi and the defense minister, and that's pretty much it. I think Gadi Eisenkot, the old head of the IDF, was there as an observer. I don't know if he still is. But really, this kind of lives and dies now with Bibi. He's centralised everything under his control, working direct with the IDF, who are showing very, very strong resolve in pushing back against some of the madder plans that have been suggested. But either way, it doesn't pay out on the ground. So even if you take the intent out of it, the actions on the ground aren't genocidal either, because significant numbers of the enemy and Hamas are getting killed, and they're allied militant groups, of course. And when you're closing in on 1-to-1 ratio between fighters killed and civilians killed, then I think that suggests to you that perhaps they're not just trying to kill indiscriminately.
But also people will go, look, Andrew, come on, there was a food embargo that lasted months. Last time I checked, I think it was 3 months that it lasted, started early March, went right through to June. This is inhumane. Children were starving. You had people, you had surgeons and doctors.
Nobody was starving during that time. During the ceasefire, about 25,000 trucks were entered from Israel with enough humanitarian aid for 8 months. That's according to the World Food Program. So how come after only 2 months they're complaining about a food shortage if there's still 6 months left?
Doctors coming out and saying people are so physically weak that when we operate upon them, the operation goes well, they're so malnourished that they then end up dying. This is awful, inexcusable, a war crime. I mean, what do you say to that?
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, I don't think Israel should have put an embargo on food. You know, it's not something I would support. However, if we look at the statistics, twice as much food has gone into Gaza during the war as beforehand. It's over 3,000 calories per person per day, which should be enough to survive on. During the ceasefire period in early January, we saw enough food going into Gaza that should have lasted between 3 and 6 months for every person in Gaza. We know Hamas is hoarding the aid supplies. We know that they have warehouses full of aid that they have been using to withhold from the population so they can control them and so that they can sell it to pay their fighters. We know that the UN has bucket loads of aid that has already been cleared for distribution by Israel, queued up at Kerem Shalom crossing in the south of Gaza, and yet the UN won't distribute it because they won't work with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So whilst on the surface, it looks appalling, and I agree, and I still state again, they shouldn't have done it, to put an aid block in. That has now been lifted. There is enough aid in Gaza. The issue is with distribution, and we have to once again insert Hamas into this conversation. There are two sides to this war. Israel is trying to feed people. Hamas are trying to retain the aid themselves and starve their own population. And the UN is refusing to deliver food because they won't work with the IDF and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So you can paint Israel as the bad guy, but that would be completely devoid of nuance and completely devoid of any balanced assessment of the situation.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, because when doing research for this interview, The problem is, Andrew, is you're looking at this, and this is somebody whose job it is to ask experts like yourselves questions. And I'm reading articles that are in The Guardian, let's not even mention Al Jazeera, but you're reading articles in The Guardian and they paint one picture. You see the UN come out and say something. You see the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation come out and say something else. And you've got political commentators of all shapes and hues with their own particular narratives. And you're looking at this and you're going, I don't know what's true. What is actually happening? Is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, do they just randomly shoot at people, which is what some people are saying? And then you've got, and then two of their operatives were injured because there was a grenade attack. I mean, I guess my question is, how do you know the truth and what is going on?
I think what you've perfectly illustrated is the fact that there are two wars going on in Gaza. There's what's actually happening in Gaza, and then there is the entire bubble of media and information maneuver that's going on around it. And that information campaign is designed to enable Hamas's survival. It's designed to force the Israelis through international pressure to a ceasefire, and it's working to an extent. You know, we saw that letter just this week from 28 countries telling Israel to cease fire, and curiously omitting the fact that it was Hamas who turned down the last ceasefire deal. So there are two wars going on here. Now, it is very hard to find out what's going on the ground. It's my job to do that, and even I've struggled over recent weeks. I had a degree of a breakthrough yesterday. And what we're looking at with the GHF is at the moment 4 distribution sites.
So just for people who don't know, let's just talk about what the GHF is, what they're appointed to do, why were they appointed it, who are they?
So part of the problem with defeating Hamas, which is Israel's war aim, is that Hamas has retained control within Gaza by leveraging the aid. So they seize it, they sell it, and that helps them control the population and pay their own fighters. So what Israel has tried to do is come up with a way to separate the people of Gaza from Hamas. Okay, they're probably not going to do that conceptually. They're probably not going to say, we now love Israel, but physically separating them so that Hamas can be destroyed and their command and control over Gaza can be deleted. And so what Israel has done is seized control of the aid delivery mechanism. So they make sure that the aid doesn't get hijacked on the way to delivery points. And they make sure that when people come to the delivery points to collect the aid, it's not then getting nicked by Hamas. Now, once people leave the delivery sites, there's obviously challenges there. But, you know, this is a far more effective way of getting aid for free to people rather than Hamas selling it to them. Because people at the GHF sites have expressed surprise when they receive aid that they haven't had to pay for it. You know, for some of them, this is the first aid in the entire war they've had that they've not had to pay for. Now, if we can start unpacking the issues here, first of all, there is the issue of thinking about it from a military tactical perspective. You have to, secure the site. So there has to be that secure delivery site before people can come to it and take the aid. That is done intimately by contractors, former American service personnel, most usually. The wider bubble of security for that secure distribution site is secured by the IDF. And where the shootings are coming in is when people are coming up to the SDS, the secure distribution site, to get the aid. They're being held back by the IDF so they don't flood the site and get trampled, which happened the other day. They tried it without the IDF securing it, and there were 19 people killed in a stampede for food. Unfortunately, the IDF have limited options, and they're using an option to control the crowds, which frankly isn't very good. They're trying to use warning shots to do it. That is certainly not how the British Army would do it, I don't think. We do use warning shots, we absolutely do, and I've seen civilians hit by them as well, so this does happen. But it is a suboptimal way, I would suggest, of putting crowd control measures in place.
Yet, I'm even questioning Andrew Fox's numbers, because nobody can provide me with images or footage or the IDF shooting at civilians of Gaza trying to go and collect aid. And nobody can provide me with footage. How come? So even the 19 people that were killed, that's not verified. All of these numbers come out from the Gaza Health Ministry to make it seem like the IDF is shooting at innocent people going to collect food.
But how I would turn that on its head is just like, what are the other options? They're not going to send troops in with riot shields. It's a war zone. You can't do crowd control whilst there's a specific threat from Hamas. And Hamas hate the GHF. 14 GHF workers so far have been injured or killed, including the 2 from a grenade the other day. Hamas are embedding people in the crowds of civilians to try and draw fire from the IDF as well. And the IDF are a bit trigger happy, if we're brutally honest.
Why is that? Why are they trigger happy?
Because it's a war zone, and because their rules of engagement need tightening up. I think they're a bit loose, personally. Certainly, perhaps not with fighter jets. I think their rules of engagement there are very, very tight. But on the ground with your grunts, your infantry, I think, frankly, they do go a bit over the top on occasion.
I have to say I disagree with Andrew Fox. The British Army would not have the same pressure, the same international pressure that the IDF is experiencing right now to operate freely and conduct a war like Israel wants to conduct a war. You can say whatever you want about the British military, but they have never fought in such conditions. But I'll say this last thing and I'll finish. Please provide me with footage from the most documented areas right now in Gaza, the GHF distribution centers, of IDF soldiers shooting civilians. The only footage I've seen is of people from Gaza filming themselves, covering their heads with sound effects of gunfire, of gunshots. That's not believable enough. I'm sorry. And if I hear the same gunshots in a different video, it doesn't sell it either. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to support me financially, you can do that using Buy Me Coffee or Patreon down in the links in the description. You can also join the Discord in the link below, and now you can become a YouTube member and enjoy specific YouTube perks. Thank you for watching this video.